Good morning. It's so awesome to see you guys. I have a little allergies. I don't have COVID anymore, so you guys are all safe. Thank you for showing up. I know this is a little bit different location, but we decided as we were growing, we didn't have enough space for coffee sponsors. We didn't have enough space for things that we want to grow into. And Katie graciously said, come on over to stage one. So thank you very much. This was awesome. So we're going to do a little bit of a round off this morning for a few of the speakers, sponsors, before we get started with our speaker today, Valerie Bruning. So first of all, thank you guys for coming to Top Floor Women. As you know, topfloorwomen.org is where you can find all of the things that are happening, and we're going to keep doing more. So Sherry Sullivan and I have been talking about starting lunches. We've got masterminds going if you're ready for business growth, so you can look into that as well. Oh, we have somebody else coming in. Yay. Hey, Liz. And so just stay tuned, right? Go to topfloorwomen.org and stay tuned. And we've got a handful of brand new people. So if you're brand new for the first time, raise your hand. Yay. That's awesome. So I've got to get a little plug for just all of you that consistently come. We love having you here. Bring a friend. We have speaker openings for next year starting in February. So if you want to speak and talk about your business, we would love to have you just connect to all of us. We also have coffee sponsors available for a few months for the rest of the year. So if you are interested in that, you get 5 minutes to talk about your business. My business is Everyday Leaders. So if you have any questions about leadership development, teamwork, team building, connection, anything to do with youth leadership or personal development, give me a call, everydayleaders.com. Joe, you are next. We're going to have some fun announcements from some of our sponsors today.
Good morning and welcome to Top Floor.
Joe Ake Studios, our media guy. Here you go, Joe.
All right.
Here, you have to hold it right here.
Hold it right here. Whew, man. Good morning. I wanted to talk just a little bit about, we've been filming Top Floor Women for almost 2 years now. And I want to make sure that it's real easy for everybody to get to the Top Floor Women playlist on YouTube. So I made a QR code, and I'm going to leave this around today, and you can just take a picture of this, and what it'll do is it'll probably open up your web browser, whether you're on an Android or you're on an iPhone, and then there'll be a little box with an arrow that points up. If somewhere on your page at the top or whatever, you may have to on an Android go to menu and then just save as like on your home page on your phone. It'll create a little icon on your desktop. I'll hold this up now if anybody wants to shoot it now. And it'll create a little icon on your home page of your phone to the playlist of Top Floor Women, and that's where this video will be. And that's where there's several videos from the past and stuff from it. If you have any questions and you can't get it to load, you can't save it on your home page like an icon on your phone, because that's what it'd be real easy for you guys to just punch that and it always goes right to the playlist and stuff. We would love you to subscribe to that channel. We would take that, and it doesn't cost anything. YouTube's not a paying platform to subscribe. It just means that if you have a YouTube or Google account, you'll know when we put a new video up. That's all that means. But you don't even have to do that. You can just load this to your home page on your phone again, and when you punch it, it'll go right to that playlist of Top Floor Women and stuff. I think that's all I have. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it, and I'll turn this back over to Mel.
Thank you. All right, so we have a few more speakers. I want to give our coffee sponsor next the opportunity. Debbie Beck, she brought coffee, which is taking a long time to make, so we're gonna change that. But we have water, and she made some little treats. So if Sam's Club, no calories on Wednesdays, so you can grab one. So Debbie Beck, if you would come up and just.
My name, first of all, is Debbie Beck. I'm with Snyder Strategy Realty. Been a realtor for over 16 years. All kinds of residential, short sales, HUD homes when we used to have homes like that. A little bit of commercial, all kinds of real estate transactions. Been helping clients achieve their dreams. I also am a certified life coach with Dream Building by Mary Morrissey, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little later. Also speak in front of groups, although I feel like I'm not doing that right now. But, it's different when you stand in front of your peers. I'm a retired teacher, so I'm used to being up in front of people. But high school kids are a little different, I think. For one thing, you pay attention. And you care. Anyway, I did corporate training for many years, teaching computer classes. Have a master's degree. Don't like to brag about myself. I just want to let you know you would be in good hands as a coach, as me being your coach. Let's see. What else do I want to say? Okay. I've always been a lifetime learner, as probably you all are too, or you wouldn't be here, constantly learning. And even in high school and when I was younger, I would read self-help books. My daughter to this day says, "Mom, if they haven't helped by now, they're not going to help you." But I'm not giving up, and I always want to learn. I figure, why read a romance book when I haven't met that guy yet anyway, And why read something that's made up when I can learn something and improve myself and improve my life? So that's what I've done my whole life. I have a whole library at home. I have a question for you. How many of you have watched The Secret? The Secret. Or read the book, The Secret? Oh, you did. A few of you have. Gushan did. I know. My neighbor. Isn't it wonderful? It has inspired me through the years. And if you haven't watched it, go to Netflix. It's free. It's about an hour and a half, I think. And you'll meet people like James Canfield, Lisa Nichols, the late Bob Proctor, who, if you don't know that name, look him up. He's a gift to all of us. But that has inspired me to go to my next level in my career, and that is to be a life coach with Dream Building. Let's see. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about that. I learned from Mary Morrissey, a rigorous program for over a year. It was really pretty hard. Even for me as a teacher, I thought it would be easy, but it wasn't. Anyway, I learned a lot, and now I'm ready to share it with others. I offer individual classes. Oh, great. Excuse me. I offer individual classes, group classes, online classes, Zoom classes, and I'll even come to your home. Now, I am used to working in corporations, so I'll be glad to offer free 1-hour vision workshops where I can explain this program a little better. So if you have any interest, and I hope you do, of changing your life, figuring out where you're stuck, not settling anymore for a life you don't truly love, and you need help, that's what I do. So I've left my card out there and a piece of paper if you wanted more information, or if you want to come to my free vision workshop. I would love to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. So we're going to have a speaker next month, so you guys can hear projection. Next, real quick, I want to give Lisa Stokes the floor here just for a second, because she represents Aspire Johnson County. If you don't know about Aspire Johnson County, she does a lot of stuff for our women's leadership groups all the time. And so I just want you to talk a little bit about Aspire, and if you need to know more, you can connect to Lisa.
All right, so I know several of you already know, but in case you don't, Aspire is the County Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development. So we support Southside indie businesses all the way to Edinburgh, but we encourage anyone who wants to be part of Aspire to be involved and join, because it brings resources to our local people so they can thrive off this growth. Some of the locals don't always know that that growing is a good thing. And so we want to connect them so that their small business thrives, and that, they do not have the problems and they understand it better. But we also work with workforce development, the school systems, connecting people to the teachers to the right people in these industries to build internships. So we help build those relationships so they know who to go to teach our kids to come back here and work with their families are. We work with a lobbyist at the State House, so we know all of the bills being passed or being submitted that could affect our businesses. And Christian Masklowski is our voice in those areas, and so we try to take care of those and make sure that what's being passed is good for your business. And then, of course, we network. We do tons of networking and tons of connections. So if you need a good, restoration company, give me a call because I've got a whole list. If you need a good chiropractor, which I will vouch, Storm Chiropractic, okay, has done amazing things for my arthritis in my neck. So, but we have 27 ambassadors. If you're not a member and you join, you're assigned an ambassador to help you through 18 months and help connect and help answer questions and find out who you want to meet. So watch for your emails. Sometimes it goes to junk and they don't get responses. And so there is a broken in that because of companies not letting things go through. But we'll figure it out. I have ambassadors here. That lady, where Marie Storm. Where is Katie, Sherry? Who else am I missing? Am I missing anybody else? Okay, these are ambassadors, so they're available for questions too. And I have information packets out there, and we have conference rooms free to our members.
All right, and one last hurrah for Katie Stallhut. So there's something for everybody. So if you're looking for an activity, you're looking for a class, you know where to sign up. Katie, thank you for having us today. Valerie Bruning, you are next. Thank you for waiting. This is awesome to have you. We have a podcast show, and we had Valerie on last fall, and it was great. And we kind of intentionally did this because I said I wanted to share what she was talking about before she did this presentation. So Valerie talks about estate planning and really special needs life planning. So the things that you're not thinking about, she helps you with. Immediately as an ambassador, I had 3 people call me and say, I need somebody for, and I'm like, it's Valerie. So it was awesome. What timing, right? So sometimes that's what happens, but we are really excited to have you, and just thanks for coming today.
So I'll just start with, my name is Valerie Bruning. I'm a local estate planning attorney. I live in Franklin, and you may recognize I was originally marketing as Bruning Law Office, but I did just merge with Findlay Law, and she is estate planning and elder law. Elder law is specifically Medicaid planning, guardianships, things like that. So it can become very important once you're taking care of parents to think about. So our Franklin office, just for reference, is at 31 and Jefferson. There's a Circle K on the same side as the fairground entrance, and there's a little strip of offices. Actually, Storm Chiropractic is right there. And we're right next door to Storm. So it says Elder Law across the top, but more specifically, it's Findlay Law. So I just merged with her, and I'll be managing the Franklin office. She has the office down in Columbus, so we're trying to serve the greater Indianapolis area, but specifically the south side. I am married. I have 2 stepdaughters. We also live in Franklin. They're both now officially in high school, so the older sister very proudly walked in with her younger sister today, and her younger sister was mortified, so it was fun to watch. So I have about 10 years of experience in the financial planning world. I was at Fidelity Investments and Ronald Blue Trust all through my 20s. So I like to tell people that because I feel like I deserve all of the credit that comes with surviving my 20s. And people don't usually think that I'm in my mid-30s. So I'd like to give myself some street cred by saying that. I switched to the legal side of estate planning. I graduated in 21 in the height of COVID, passed the bar, so I've been practicing for about 3 years now. So today we're going to talk about estate planning. These are our available services. So this is more Medicaid, elder law, asset protection, Medicaid qualifications, and then I'm more down here, the estate planning, estate and trust, and guardianships. So So we're going to talk about what an estate plan is. This can be a very daunting term. People don't always know what it means. They usually have some kind of horror story of some family member passing away and having to deal with all of this mess. It's also very difficult to find an attorney. Most people are just Googling estate planning attorney. They have some awareness of, oh, I need to get a guardianship, designation set up in my will for my kids, or they just hear, probate, the word probate. So I'm here to make that easier. And you now know an attorney that can help you with your estate plan. And also, I just want to explain what it is so that it just feels less daunting. So at its very basic, these are the 4 documents you have to consider. There may be slides that are interesting to you guys. Feel free to take pictures. I try to keep my slides super basic, though. So anyways, we have our wills, our last will and testament, our financial power of attorney, our healthcare advance directives, and trust. The healthcare advance directives is the new term for living will, and a healthcare power of attorney, they've combined it into one document. So that's why you don't see the word living will or healthcare power of attorney up there. So we're going to talk through each one of these documents. We'll start with our last will and testament. This is a legal document that outlines how you want your assets to pass and be distributed after death so that the government does not decide for you, which I will be explaining here in a minute. The second primary, purpose of a will is to designate a guardianship for your kids. So I'm going to assume that everyone in here either has minor children or knows somebody with minor children, so please convey to them the importance of doing this. I like to start with the guardianship planning because this is the heaviest topic. We really have to think about what will happen to our children if we die. We really have to come to terms with the fact that we're not going to be on this planet forever. And I like to use an analysis of a room this size. Okay, your children are standing in the middle, right? And you have family from all sides standing around. Maybe they're intermingling. Maybe everything's good. Maybe there's, missiles flying overhead. Maybe they're ostracized in the corner. We don't know what the dynamics are. But I will tell you this, when everybody is triggered from the death in the family and they are acting out of that triggered state and are scared to death that they're going to lose access to the children, they're not going to look pretty. They're not going to look cute. And I can speak from experience on this, being a part of a blended family. So imagine your kids in the middle. Everybody is fighting, right? People are going to start petitioning for guardianship. People are going to start telling the judge, well, their parents would have wanted this. The parents would have wanted this. This is what's best for the kids. So you have a judge in charge. They know the least about your children, and they have the most power over the decisions in their lives. So you'll normally get like a guardian ad litem involved. So the children are sat down and questioned about what they want, about, every question you can imagine. Your small children are having to answer about where they want to go and how, these are horrible questions for a kid to have to answer. And sometimes the judge is the one asking the questions too. So you making that decision and communicating that to your family members is critical. Because let's get all the mad out of the way now. This is what I would decide. This is my succession plan. And I will always champion and advocate for the fact that you need to tell people what's in your estate planning documents. So this will give your kids the best chance at moving through their grief and living the best life that they can. So that's the heaviest part. We can move forward, although we are still going to talk about dying. I'm sorry. So... Yeah.
I know, of course, with guardianship and you going through and laying that out, it would be probably fairly black and white of who the guardians are. Do you also have the freedom to state other wishes in terms of like, let the kids see these groups or protect them from,
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can do that in 2 ways. So you can put as much language as you want in your will.
Okay.
A lot of it, it's questionable. I don't know if it would be legally enforceable, but so hopefully the people you're putting in charge you trust and have expressed your wishes to them. But we do a standby guardianship, which is the first 90 days, because whoever you name as guardian is still going to have to petition the court. But you can put a document in place that will cover the first 90 days, and you can put all of those wishes in it. You can say if you're okay with them being relocated, you can say like, this is the school I'd like them to go to, this, that, and the other. And you can put anything you want in your will. I've had people put all kinds of random stuff in their will, and I'm like, they're like, I want this to happen at the will reading. I'm like, there's not really will readings anymore, but I'll make sure they know. I don't care if I'm the person they hate, then that's fine. So, but yes, so you can do stuff like that. Now, once legal guardianship is granted to a party, they're kind of given complete discretion. So it's a good way to make your wishes known. And we don't have to let them know that that's not legally enforceable, right? We'll just tell them, like, hey, it's in the will, so you have to do it. So yeah. Any other questions about guardianship? And there'll be certain points in here that I know you'll have more questions, so we'll stop and, designating who will inherit your estate. Okay, so there's something called intestacy laws, and this is if you die without a will. And this is why you need a will. This will shock you. This will shock you what the legislature thinks makes the most sense to do with your assets if you don't have a will. So we're going to focus on this for a second. This might be an interesting slide to people. So intestacy laws are different than probate. You can have a will and still need to probate the will. Intestacy laws are when you do not have a will. This is like the legislature says, well, they didn't have a will, so we're going to say that this is how their assets should pass. So you have 4 different ways for your assets to pass. Jointly titled assets. A lot of married people own everything jointly. Their bank accounts, their investment accounts, their house, they own joint with rights of survivorship. They usually have their spouse listed as a beneficiary. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. Jointly titled assets will always pass to the joint owner. No probate, no will needed. Beneficiary designation. This is your IRAs, your life insurance, your 401ks. Transfer on death deed is something we can talk about too, but that will always pass to the beneficiary. These 2 types of titling circumvent your will. So it doesn't matter if you forget to retitle something to mirror your will, or unless you're intentionally doing that, sorry. If there's people named as an ex-wife named as a beneficiary on a life insurance policy, it's going to be real tough to untangle that, okay, if at all, right? So you have to be very mindful of your beneficiary designations and your jointly titled assets, and we always include a letter that says, please go through each one of your assets and make it reflect what your will says. Your third one is a revocable living trust. We'll talk about trust in a minute. This is the one we're going to talk about here. So the will comes into play when property is in your own individual name. And most of the time you'll see this with an inheritance, and then it's deeded out of an estate to one particular child, but they're married. They forget to retitle it to include their spouse. Also, maybe your partner purchased a property, and then you come in on the scene maybe 10 years later, you move into that house. Well, they're the ones that bought the house, and it only has their name on it. This happens all the time. So you have to, again, be very mindful of making sure your assets are either titled jointly or you have a beneficiary designation. That one's the most important if you're married, particularly if you're a subsequent spouse, which again, we'll talk about in a minute. So this is where, if you do not have this as a catch-all, this is what the government says. Some examples. So let's say your spouse inherits or purchases a piece of property in their sole name, they forget to add you. And they don't have a will, and they die. So you're the spouse, there's no children from a previous marriage, there's no children from your marriage, everything passes to you, straightforward. Once you start getting kids involved, it's not straightforward. If there's children and grandchildren, even with you, whether you're the first spouse or the secondary spouse, they decide that you're only entitled to half of it, and the kids are entitled to the other half. Why are my biological children that I shared with this person entitled to half of this property? Legislature thought it was a good idea. Okay, this is the one that really gets me, because I'm a childless subsequent spouse. Talk about depressing. That is not a term that I like to use, but it's what the legislature says I am. So, subsequent childless spouse. So I've married my husband. He has 2 daughters. I have no biological children. I'm a second wife. His first wife passed away. So what they say about me is that if he owned the property in his own name and he passed, I'm only entitled to 25% and the kids are entitled to 75%. If we have not gone through this process and this process, or have a will, which we have all 3, don't worry. I locked him down tight. So 7 days after our marriage, I was like, we will sit down and we will sign these documents. But I've seen situations where 30 years, people were married. It's a second marriage. They didn't have any children. Maybe they got married when they're 50, they're now 80. The guy passes, the woman, there's children from a previous marriage. This subsequent spouse is stuck. She's only entitled to 25% of the value of that house. Usually the house is the only asset. The children from the previous marriage are entitled to 75%. And they're heartbroken. They have to move because they're like, this is a house I've had for 30 years, but they're forced out of it because the children are entitled to 75%. Please get a will. Please get a will, okay? Because this may not be circumstances you're dealing with now, but it very likely will be in the future, or you'll have a family member dealing with this. So you can leave family members in very, very, very vulnerable places by doing this. And the same, far be it from me to be sexist, the same can happen to us. We might have a property just in our name and we leave our husband in this kind of position, or spouse, sorry, try to be gender neutral. But, so yes, these are called intestacy laws. They almost never bring peace and harmony. It pisses everybody off, okay? So that's why we get a will, okay? However, we'll come back to this in a second when we talk about trust. Having a will does not necessarily mean avoiding probate. Probate is a scary word to a lot of people. It's very different than it used to be, especially post-COVID. People think there's lots of hearings and it's scary, but with a will, probate is not scary. Probate can happen with and without a will. With a will, it's not scary. Most things are electronic. And if you've meticulously gone through each of your assets, entitled them jointly, and have beneficiary designations, you don't even need to open an estate. You don't have to probate the will. So that's a way to avoid probate, is to get these two things in place with all of your assets. And then this is a catch-all for if you have a property or anything that you've forgotten to retitle or put a beneficiary designation on. So, any questions about this?
Kind of specific. Excuse me. If you don't have any of these things in place, you're a single unmarried person with a child. The child is the survivor, but what if they're a minor?
So, that's a very interesting question. I've had this happen a lot. So, have you passed or has the father passed? Either one? Okay. So the minor will be entitled to your share. So if one of your parents passed and there was, some percentage that was there were entitled to based on if they were children from a previous or current marriage, whether it's 75%, 50%, your child would be entitled to your share. However, you have to petition the court for guardianship of the estate, even as a biological parent. I don't know why. But basically, you're telling the court, I need to manage her finances, his finances, until they're 18. So we have to go spend several $1,000s, petition the court, get that in place so that inheritance can be made out to the estate of, this kid. And then you can deposit it into that guardianship checking account, and then it has to be monitored by the court. So it's extremely intense, but it's reality of. But yeah, a minor child is absolutely entitled to their parents' share of whatever they were entitled to. Any other questions, horror stories, other things we can do to reinforce the concept of getting a will? No? Okay. Raise your hand if you can think of one. Yeah. Oh, let's hear it. I want to hear it. We've got time.
My father married his second wife. Neither one of them had any will. They owned property together. She died. My father died the very next day.
Oh. Okay.
So as the eldest child of him, I inherited everything, which wasn't much,
Right.
honestly. But it got really, it got to the point where I just said, I don't want it.
Right.
And gave it to her.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people do that because it's too overwhelming to even think about it. And I think that's where you're at the mercy of your family members getting these plans in place, And so if any influence you guys have to speak into the lives of your family members, this is a gift to your family. This is not for you. This is for the people that you leave behind. So that's what happens every single day. I have very complex probate situations where, I'm representing the grandchild in one of them. And this wife, she's actually renting the property, so I really don't feel that bad that we're kicking her out. But like, it's like, I would feel bad if we were kicking her out, but we're not. Like, this grandchild is entitled to 75%. I'm sorry, you know, and so it is what it is. The law is what it is. And I mean, we will win every single time. If that's the code, and this is what the legislature says is gonna happen, then that's what's gonna happen. But you can, here's what the attorney tried to do for the wife, for the subsequent wife, tried to contact the mom and say, well, she can just sign off, like just say she doesn't want it. I'm like, ooh, she talks to you one more time. Like, and so I'm like, you just tell her you have an attorney to not call you anymore. So, but yeah, she tried to get her to sign off. But a lot of people do that because they don't want to deal with it. Yeah. Anything else on that subject? Okay. So, let's talk about financial power of attorney. This is the second document, the critical document in your estate planning package. This is a legal document that allows an individual to appoint someone else to act on your financial behalf. If there is one document that I've seen more fraud on, this is it right here. This is the most fraudulently used document. It's very, very powerful. It's called a general durable power of attorney. There are so many kids who are the primary caregiver, so legitimately they are the ones caring for the parent, maybe living in the home, and then there are other children that maybe live in other states or just aren't participating, but they feel like they're entitled to use this document to just drain assets, not for the benefit of the person or the parent that they're caring for. So very, very abused document. If it's just being used to pay bills, like that's not fraudulent. That's what it's there for, right? But this document allows you to walk into any financial institution, any title company, anything where there's any exchange of assets or money and gives them authority to act on that behalf. So please make sure you trust the person that you are designating in this role. You can also, blended families, this comes up a lot. You can appoint 2, 3, you can have multiple with checks and balances. You can require all of them to act together. You can require make 3 people your agent and then just have, let's say any one of them can act alone. You can do 2 out of 3 signatures are required for any transaction. There's a lot of different combinations you can do with this, and especially comes up when there's a second marriage when they're like older, 60 or 70. Please talk to me before you get married when you're 60 or 70. I'm not going to recommend it, okay? But usually there's children. Be happy, love each other, be together, but legally, don't do that. And a lot of times it comes into play with Medicaid planning as well. One of them has all these assets, the other one is in poverty, they're on Social Security, and then this one's refusing to pay for long-term care. This one would qualify if they weren't married. It happens all the time. Please don't get married when you're older, but you can if you want to. I'm just going to tell you not to do it. So what were we talking about? Hold on. So financial power of attorney, blended family. So there was a wife who was starting to become diminished. Her capacity was diminishing. She got married in their 60s. She has 2 children, 2 daughters from a previous marriage. The daughters have been caring for her for decades, right? So now this guy comes in. They're like, we've known you for what, maybe a year? Like, who are you? You don't get to take over my mom. We've been managing her finances. We've been managing her health for this long. So she designated her daughter as power of attorney, financial power of attorney, and then all 3 of them as healthcare, but it requires 2 decision makers at least. So if the husband and a daughter are united on a healthcare decision, then it can be made, or if the 2 daughters are united on a healthcare decision, the decision can be made and they can vote out the husband. It's not good. He's mad 100% of the time. So yes, but there's all kinds of solutions that you can do if there's blended families. Yes.
A designated bank account, let's just say you want to designate one person to pay your bills.
Yes.
Without them being financial power of attorney over
Yes.
everything. Is that possible?
Yes. So you could do it 2 ways. The bank may have an internal process or policy where they let somebody be added as an authorized user, or maybe even joint owner if it makes sense to be able to pay the bills. I typically don't recommend joint ownership, but you can. But sometimes you can just be added as POA using bank or financial institution documentation for just that specific account. And if not, we can put in place a limited power of attorney. So we can specify this is the only thing they have control over, and then you take that into the bank. Limited power of attorneys tend to get hung up in their legal departments more often, make them more nervous from a liability standpoint. So I generally recommend going to the institution and asking them what their process is. And they'll have some form, and it's very specific to their company. So there's multiple options though. So any other questions? Okay. Two things about this. It can become effective immediately, or it can become effective upon your incapacitation as determined by a licensed physician. I have people pick both for different reasons. Effective immediately means you really trust the person you're putting in charge, and if you're out of the country, or you don't have to be incapacitated for them to use it. They can use it if it's just inconvenient for you to do a transaction. If you make it effective upon your incapacitation, as determined by a licensed physician, they usually have to bring a letter from a licensed physician along with the document. And that can make it challenging because once you're incapacitated, things slow down majorly. And they might have to get that letter updated every 60 days. So it can be frustrating for them, but also a lot of people do it because they don't want this document to be abused. And even, if you have a licensed physician signing a letter, which they're not always willing to do that anymore, that means you're really, really incapacitated, right? And so you're needing help with these types of things. So those are two things you need to think about if you're sitting down: is effective immediately, effective upon incapacitation. This is also a very, very crucial document for long-term planning. So let's say you don't have capacity anymore to make decisions. Now you need long-term care, which is another word for assisted living or a nursing home. We try to use politically correct terms, but you're kind of stuck. Now the attorney has to go get guardianship because if you don't have capacity to sign this, now we have to go to the court and get guardianship. That's thousands and thousands of dollars, and you have to have physicians sign off on it, a judge sign off on it. There's all kinds of things. It's very, very expensive. So if you can get this in place earlier, your children can then take over that process of getting that long-term care in place, which can also just be in-home care. It doesn't have to be moved to a facility. There's lots of different care options available through Medicaid. The last slide, we talk about long-term care, so we can talk about that a little bit. Okay. All right. The next document is our advanced healthcare directives. This is, again, what used to be called a living will and healthcare power of attorney. If you have those documents in place, you don't need to redo it as long as it still reflects your wishes. But this is the new term just to simplify things for medical providers. This is where you are going to make your decisions about quality of life versus staying alive. And generally, this is saying I want quality of life even only if it's terminal. There's no chance of me having any meaningful existence, that type of thing. And I've never seen someone that picks staying alive, but even if they do, there still is caveats that say my representative still has discretion to withdraw care if they feel like it's in accordance with my wishes. But you do get to make those two decisions. You get to decide who your decision makers are. And again, you can pick 1, 2, 3. Honestly, you could pick more than that. I wouldn't recommend picking more than that because then you start getting into real tricky family dynamics and lots of disagreements. But there is lots of combinations that you can do to accommodate for difficult dynamics. So, okay, any questions about healthcare?
Is it recommended that the person is in your geographical location? Does that matter?
So it's always better to have somebody, but so usually what will happen is if there's a child that lives in another state and one that lives locally, they'll make them both their representative and allow them to act alone and just be like, well, if this is the person that shows up first, they can act alone. But the language is always if they are unwilling or unable, right, then the next person kicks into play. So if you really want the decisions being made by the person in a different state, but they're not able to get there in time or they can't get them on the phone or whatever it is, then the other child can step in to make those decisions. So, also very interestingly, the code allows for these representatives to also delegate their decision-making powers to another person that you haven't even named. So on my forms, I always put like, I disqualify the following individuals, which usually has some kind of ex-husband or mortal enemy put in that line of under no circumstances is this person to make decisions for me. So yeah, that's always fun. Yes?
So can you actually designate the first decision maker and then the second?
Yes.
I mean, so you can actually.
Like a succession of this person unless they're unwilling or unable, then this person unless they're unwilling or unable, or then this person. So we like to have at least two. Yes.
Have you seen issues where two people, like for instance, my brother and I we have to agree. Have you seen issues where siblings or somebody doesn't agree and then how that would work?
So generally what I've been seeing now is there's palliative care teams at hospitals that are helping families work through decisions, especially when there's lots of dynamics. And they work really hard at convincing people that there's going to be no quality of life if this decision is made. But ultimately, by the statute, doctors, if something ridiculous is being asked, doctors aren't required to follow like ridiculous instructions. So at some point, a determination will be made of this is the most reasonable decision and will cause the least liability for the hospital. But they're going to help you make those decisions. But yes, I see lots of conflict with these types of documents, and it's tricky. There's no foolproof way of avoiding that. So.
I got a question. The other day I was at the bank and I overheard this lady, she wanted to do upon that in her bank account.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have a will or estate planning or anything in place.
Mm-hmm. You can do that. Yeah.
And do you need both, or you just, once you have one in place, you don't need the other?
If you are 100% confident that you have set up a payable on death, or sometimes it says transfer on death, the TOD or POD on your bank accounts, that is a beneficiary designation and that avoids probate. Okay, and if all of these have been established or this, I'll tell people, you know, if what you're telling me is correct, you don't need a will, especially when financially they're not able to afford us to make one. But at the same time, this is a catch-all in case there's something that somebody didn't know about. But if you can confidently say, I've done all of this, you may or may not need a will. So, but you didn't hear that from me. Okay, sorry, is this recorded? Okay.
What's the difference then between putting your home in a trust versus a will?
That's next.
Used on that. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for the headway. No, you're good. Okay, so trust. This is a very elusive term. People hear this all the time. Most of the time people are like, this is what I want to avoid probate. Is this something you can use to avoid probate? Yes. But we will only recommend them for more complex estate plans. Because if all you have is a house, you have titled with your husband, and maybe you have a life insurance policy, a couple of IRAs, and I don't know, there's a couple bank accounts that are owned jointly. A trust is expensive and difficult to fund, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're going to say a will and this is sufficient. But if you own property in multiple states, automatic trust, you do not want to have to probate multiple. A will work in another state, but you do not want to have to go to multiple states or make your representative have to go to multiple states to probate that. So what I tell people, property in multiple states, at any point you buy another property in another state, you want to get a trust set up. Also, it can be really helpful if your personal representative, aka executor, lives in a different state or like is super far away. It can be really convenient to have a trust because they can administer a trust from California. But probate, generally, you have to come to the state at some point. So it can be really helpful for that.
What about they live in a different country? Because I've had that done before, and then I had to remove it, redone the whole thing.
You mean property in a different country or your representatives in a different country?
Representatives in a different country.
Yeah. I would still recommend a trust in that instance because you're probably still going to have an attorney helping you wrap up the affairs, but they're just emailing them stuff for signatures, right? Like they're just signing as trustee. They're not having to open anything with the court or be present for anything with the court. So I would still recommend a revocable trust. Property in different countries can be a little trickier, and I'm not as well versed in that, but I would think you're still going to want to have a trust in that instance. So that's another reason. Avoiding probate, again, maybe, maybe not. However, probate is public. So if you value privacy, getting a trust may make sense because a trust is private. Nobody's going to see who your beneficiary designations are, what's going where. So a lot of people with larger amounts of money want to get a trust in place so people don't get all up in their business. It is extremely easy to get the documents from an estate. So privacy, that's a big one. I'm just making sure I covered everything on that. Okay, creditor protection for your beneficiaries. Most trust that people want is a revocable living trust. It is consider it an extension of you as an individual. It does not change your tax status. It's completely revocable and amendable. You can change it at any point. It's reportable under your social security number. There's no separate tax return. It's like having an individual bank account in your name, essentially, but it provides some of these other protections. However, when you pass, creditors can only make claims on an estate. So if you have a business, honestly, anybody with a business, I'm going to recommend a trust because maybe there's creditors from the business that you don't want to stick to your children, right? Creditors can currently only file claims when something goes through probate. But if it goes through a trust, they don't know, they don't see it, they don't know that it exists. So they can't make a claim on a trust. Also, if you decide, because you have irresponsible children, that, drug addicts, just fiscal irresponsibility, whatnot, you can keep the money in the trust for the child for their entire life if you want to, and make the trustee, you have to find a trustee that's willing to do that, and that can be challenging, but you make it so that the money can be used for their benefit, it can be used to pay their bills, maybe give them a little bit of an allowance, but it doesn't pass directly to their bank account because then creditors, the IRS, whoever can come in and get it. So it can provide a lot of protection for your children or anybody who is inheriting your estate. And when it comes to making a subsequent trust for your children, you can do that in a will, you can do that in a trust. There's multiple ways to do that. But you can choose any life event, any age, just really any circumstances. If the trustee, within the trustee's discretion, determines that drugs have become a problem, that they're in trouble with the law, literally anything. But again, you have to find somebody that's willing to say no, to enter into that conflict. And it can be really challenging to find a trustee that is willing to do that.
I got a question because you mentioned earlier that it will cost a lot of money. Was that the trust to continue or the estate planning? You have to pay once a year or after you get this in place?
This is a one-time, to put all of the documents in place, it's like a one-time, you do it all at once. And unless it needs to be changed, which is usually going to be much cheaper than getting it put into place initially. The thing about trust is that it can add up to $1,000 to your estate planning package, depending on the complexity of the trust. But it's also difficult to go through the administrative process of funding it. Funding trusts, and this is what we need to talk about, make sure I'm staying in my time limit. Funding trusts, a lot of attorneys used to just draft trusts and kind of, deed the house into the trust and be like, okay, you have the trust now. But what they've done is they've created a probate and a trust administration by doing that. The only way to avoid probate with a trust is to go through each one of your assets, your bank accounts, your investment accounts, everything, to fund it into the trust. So for life insurance, annuities, 401ks, IRAs, you make the beneficiary the trust, the primary beneficiary. And any property held jointly, you deed into the trust. Investment accounts and bank accounts get retitled so that the actual name of the account is the Revocable Living Trust of, and then you're listed as a trustee. So you have to meticulously go through each asset for the trust to work and to not, for all of these benefits to come into play. Because again, if you have a beneficiary on your life insurance policy that's an ex-wife, but you've put a trust in place and didn't change that beneficiary, it's not going to go to your trust. It's going to go to your ex. So it's very important. And again, we provide instructions to people on helping them do this, and you can call us and ask questions, and we get the deed ready for you for your different properties and stuff like that. So, yeah, incapacity. This is one thing I like to highlight. If you become incapacitated, I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen a child take a parent, again, usually the caregiver, the child that feels like they're entitled to the money because they've been caring for the parent, which that's not for me to morally decide, but it's a little bit of an aggressive strategy in my opinion. But they'll take their parent to an attorney to get the will changed. An attorney's has to determine something called testamentary capacity. It requires a lucid moment. If they come in, they can explain to you what their assets are. They can explain who they want to put in charge, even if it's because they've been coached and conditioned and made to repeat themselves over and over. If you can have that conversation with them, with the other person out of the room, and they seem to understand what they're doing, the attorney's going to be like, they have capacity. But then they sundown, and then everything changes, and they don't have capacity anymore. So what's really nice about a trust is that if you become incapacitated, it makes the trust irrevocable. But it does need to be determined by a licensed physician. So if there's another child who feels like somebody else is abusing that, another sibling is abusing it, they go get a letter from the licensed physician, and then they lock down the trust. It's usually still going to involve the court, but yeah. Oh, sorry, just a second.
So what if you have two children, one of them you want to put the assets they're going to inherit in a trust, but the other one you're just going to let it pass through because they're responsible?
Outright. So you can do two things. So you can still name the trust, you can still retitle it, because what if that person passes, right? And then do you want it to go to the remaining child? So you can just title everything in the trust, and then in the trust you say, this child's share shall be distributed to them outright, free of trust. But your trustee will be the one signing that check, right? And it can even be them, honestly. But then if they pass, it'll either go to their children or it will go for the benefit of this other child that will stay in trust. So it's a way to kind of capture all of the circumstances, but you can always just put that child as the beneficiary on whatever account or make it a joint account or whatever it is. There's other ways of doing that. But if you have a trust, I'm generally going to say fund everything into the trust, as long as the trust captures your actual wishes of what you want to happen. So.
In determining incapacity, is it just one physician or two?
It can be two, if you want it. That makes it much more difficult for people to act, because then you have to get 2 letters within 60 days. But it can be a really great protection, because the most well-meaning people, when they've been caring for somebody for 15 years, and their siblings haven't done anything to lift a finger, it makes sense to have to do that. So this is why, again, have the conversations before you become incapacitated. You know what I mean? Like, because a lot of times these children are also living for free in these houses. So it's kind of like, has there been a trade-off? Yes. So, but yes, you can make it upon 2. It doesn't have to be any. You can make it incapacitated as determined by my representative or trustee. I don't usually recommend that, though. At least make it 1. If you're going to make it determined based on your incapacity, let's have at least 1 doctor have a say in that. So, okay, any questions about trust?
I have one question. I have kids in the military, and they did some stuff through the military. If happens to them, you know? Do I still need something like this with the kids if they already got it done through military?
So their plan will cover just them and their children or their heirs. This plan for you, hold on, this plan for you will ensure that it passes the way you want it to your children. So for example, if something happens to you and you've designated one of your children in the military as one of the beneficiaries, it will go to their estate and then pass according to what the documents that they set up. So it's very critical for you to have your plan and for them to have their plan. That's the way that it will ideally work for everybody, is that each person has their own estate plan. So, any other questions? Got one more slide here. Long-term planning. So my boss is really the one that does the deep dive into Medicaid, and there's different places that she talks, and so if you're interested in hearing one of her Medicaid trainings, let me know and I can get you connected with one. But what I can speak to is that POAs are critical. Get your POAs in place before you start, if you sense that something's happening. I will say this as well. Please also be willing to admit that something is happening to you. Many, many, many people really struggle with the concept that they might be getting dementia or something else. And I hope to God I will not be that person just because of what I've been exposed to. It is traumatizing for your children to be caring for you and for you to be putting that kind of weight and burden on them to have to fight you to get you the care that you need. So have this mindset of maybe even think of not if this will happen, but when will it happen, right? It doesn't happen to everybody. But getting these documents in place, again, it takes care of your children. It helps them know I'm not going to wish hell upon you. If I need long-term care, I trust you with that discretion. I would like to stay at home. I would like to do assisted living. But if I need 24-hour care, that is your decision to make. So these POAs are what you can get in place to help your children make those decisions. I highly recommend prepaid funeral arrangements and your burial plots, whatnot. For Medicaid planning purposes, it is very good to make them irrevocably assigned to the funeral home so that they don't count as an asset against you should you need that planning. But your funeral home will walk you through that. They're like experts in that. So this is a really, really good way to help your family, again, not have to make these really hard decisions in the throes of grief. And also help them not have to put a $10,000 bill on their credit card because they don't have all of your accounts get locked as soon as they find out that you've passed. So this is a really good way to help your children as well. Having a list of assets, oh my gosh, please, somewhere, write down a list, not your passwords, just write down a list of everything you have, because so much of the time, children are like, there's a life insurance policy from 50 years ago. They have no idea about it. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars that get escheated to the state all the time because children had no idea that that asset existed. So having some kind of, they call them like, I love you folders, you know, like the red folder in your filing cabinet of like, this is everything that I have that I know about. And then what we will tell people when we're helping them is, let's go check the Attorney General's site for unclaimed property periodically for the next 5 years to see if there's anything that gets escheated to the state as well. But a lot of times they're just looking through mail. Like, there's a statement from here, there's a statement from there. I don't know what they have. So having a list is good, keeping good records. Discussing your wishes for healthcare, you know, end of life versus quality of, or staying alive versus quality of life. These are all just super, super important conversations to have with your children. And then asset protection options. When you are ready, or your children are ready to start doing long-term care planning, you generally start that asset protection planning when you're about 6 months out from needing care. And there's so many things we can put in place. What they're saying, what my boss says is, if it's just one spouse, the other one has died, or it's just a single individual that needs care, you can save about 50% of assets. If there is what's called a community spouse, one that does not need care, and then one that does need care, you can generally save 100% of the assets. So those are both things to keep in mind, and just know that you aren't just going to lose the house.
So both of my parents are in their 80s, and my sister and I decided to do this because they go down to Clearwater every winter, and they stay down there. And we never know if it's the last time we're going to see them, because we can see aging and dementia starting. And my dad with some diabetes issues, and so before they left last winter, we decided to talk to them and have them to show us everything we needed to know. But my sister and I both videotaped everything they were saying, all the accounts, all the records, everything. So we both have a copy of that.
Good.
And it was probably close to an hour long.
Yeah.
But we have that for a record. And
Yes.
he showed us also
Yes.
where things were.
That's
And now
so
he's saying
important.
we need to update a few things. So
Okay.
it's
It's so important. It is such a gift to your family, to your children, to whoever will be handling these things, to do that for them. I just cannot emphasize that enough. That's really wonderful that he did that with you guys. So we've got about 45 seconds left. Any other questions?